Hello, you guys. Welcome to your first lesson in Math 1 Essentials. This lesson is going to be on real number classification. And before we get started, I need you to get ready a few things for me. So the first thing that you need to have ready is a piece of paper, okay? Remember when you watched the Your Responsibilities for This Class video and I told you about how things work? Um, I want you to fold your piece of paper in half and you are going to be working down the columns. Okay, so you're going to start in this column, you're going to work down, and then you're going to go to the top of the other column and you're going to work down. And then if you need to, you're going to flip your piece of paper over and do the same thing again. So you're going to work down one column and then work down the other column. That is just going to make it easier for Miss Kohler and I to be able to look through your work and grade it. Okay, it's a good way to keep everyone organized and on the same page. So before I start, I need you to have a piece of paper out. I also need you to have something to write with. This is really important, okay? So a piece of paper and something to write with. And then please get a calculator out as well, okay? So if you can find a calculator, get one and have it right next to you, okay? We may not use our calculators that much today, but as we progress through this class and do some of the lessons that we're going to do, you are definitely going to need a calculator, okay? So if you don't have a calculator at all, please let your learning coach know that for this class, you will need a calculator. Okay, so with that said, we are going to go ahead and get started. Remember that you are responsible to take notes. You are responsible to do practice problems along with me while you are watching this video. And then you also are responsible to do your quiz at the end of this video. There is no multiple choice quiz options for this class, okay? Everything is going to be written on your piece of paper and turned into the assignment box. It's really, really important that Miss Kohler and I are able to see your work so that we can help you know what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong and be able to help you fix that if you're doing something wrong. So let's go ahead and get started. This first lesson is on real number classification. When we think about real numbers, those are basically any number that you can think of would be considered a real number. As you get further along in mathematics, you may start to learn about imaginary numbers, but I doubt that many of you have gotten there yet. Okay, so any number that you can give me or think about or give an example for would be considered a real number. And we're going to talk about some of the different ways that those real numbers can be classified. So the first one is a natural number. Okay. Um, so what I want you to do is on your piece of paper right now, I want you to go ahead and write natural number. And sorry, let me back up. So on your piece of paper here, okay, please put your name at the top left of your paper. And then on the top right, you can write today's lesson, which is real number classification. Okay, so on the top left, you're going to put your name. On the top right, you're going to put real number classification. We just want to make sure that that assignment is labeled properly and that it gets in the correct assignment box. Okay, so natural number. Natural numbers are our counting numbers. Natural numbers start with 1. Okay, if you're going to count something, you would always start with 1 as the first thing that you were counting. Okay, so natural numbers 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and going up from there. The next one that we're going to talk about is a whole number. The whole numbers include 0 and then all of the natural numbers. Okay, so this is the second word and definition that you're going to write on your piece of paper. A whole number includes zero. Whole numbers include zero, and then all of the natural numbers. Okay, and you can see that I've put an example of that right here. Okay, so 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Whole numbers are numbers that are whole. Okay, so if a number is a part of a whole, like a fraction or a decimal, it has a different name, and we're going to talk about that in just a second. Okay, so the whole numbers include 0 and then all of the natural numbers. The next one we need to talk about is an integer. Integers are positive and negative whole numbers. Okay, so you can see that we have 0, and then we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Okay, so those would be our whole numbers. The opposite of 1 is negative 1. Negative 1 is considered an integer. The opposite of 2 is negative 2. Negative 2 is considered an integer. The opposite of 3 would be negative 3. Negative 3 is considered an integer. Okay, so basically integers are all of the positive whole numbers and their opposites. Okay. The next word you need to have written down is rational number. Rational numbers can be positive or negative, and rational numbers are any numbers that can be written as a fraction. Okay, so if a number can be written as a fraction, then we would consider it a rational number. Rational numbers are parts of whole numbers. Okay, so when we look here, we have 2 and we have negative 3. Those can be considered rational numbers. Okay, remember, rational numbers can be anything that can be written as a fraction. And this is an important thing for you to remember for this class. If you have a whole number and you want to write it as a fraction, you just put it over 1. Okay, so the way that we would write 2 as a fraction is we would write it as 2 over 1. If we have negative 3 and we want to write that as a fraction, we would do negative 3 over 1. Okay, anytime you want to write a whole number or an integer as a fraction, you just put it over 1. The next one, 0.25. Okay, so 0.25. When we're talking about decimals, okay, the number to the left of the decimal is the tenths. The number next to the tenth is the hundredths. So counting to the right, it would be tenths, hundredths. So if we wanted to write 0.25 as a fraction, we could write it as 25 hundredths. That's another way to say 0.25, okay? And then obviously 2/5 is already a fraction. So rational numbers, they can be positive or negative, and any number that can be written as a fraction is considered a rational number. The last classification that we need to talk about is irrational numbers. They can be positive or negative, and they are any number that cannot be written as a fraction. Okay, so these are basically never repeating, never ending decimals. So for those of you who have a calculator out, when you put square root of 2 in your calculator, you're going to get something that looks like this. 1.41421356. Okay, so can you see that to the right of the decimal, we don't have any numbers that repeat, and this decimal continues on. It never ends. So this would be considered a non-repeating, never-ending decimal. So anytime you have that happen, you're talking about an irrational number. So I gave you another example here of an irrational number, a never repeating, never ending decimal. Pi, this is another one. and we're going to be using this in this class. The approximation for pi is 3.14, but that has been rounded up, okay? Pi is actually a never repeating, never ending decimal. Okay, so you're probably wondering, what am I going to do with all of this? Okay, one of the things that we want you to be able to do is take a number and classify each number as natural, whole, integer, rational, irrational, and then place it on a number line. So let's talk about a number line really quickly. Here's an example of a number line. Okay, here's 0. When we're looking at a number line, the numbers, as we move to the right on the number line, the numbers continue to increase in value. Okay. As we move to the left on the number line, the numbers continue to decrease in value. So a -5 is of less value than a -4. Okay. And when we think about positive, negative numbers, a good way to think about this is money. Okay, I know that most teenagers understand money. And so if you're talking about positive numbers, that is having money. If you're talking about negative numbers, that is owing money. Okay, so if you owe -5 or you owe $5, you have less. That's of less value than if you owe $4. Okay, so I hope that that makes sense to you. And obviously, if you have $5, that is more than having $4. So just remember that on a number line, as we move to the right, the numbers increase in value, and as we move to the left, the numbers decrease in value. Okay. When we're trying to place rational numbers on the number line, the rational numbers are going to fall in between the whole numbers. Okay, so in between 0 and 1, there is a whole set of rational numbers. Or in between 1 and 2, there is a whole set of rational numbers. Okay, if a number is right here, that means that it's 1 and then part of a number, but not quite to 2. So let's go ahead and try one of these. 0.25. Now, we know that this isn't one of the numbers we count with. Okay, so we know it's not a natural number. We know it's not a whole number. And because it's not a whole number, it's not an integer. This number is a rational number, which means it's not an irrational number. So 0.25. What we would do is we would say, and I want you to do this on your piece of paper, you're going to put number 1, 0.25, and then you're going to write, this is a rational number. And then you're going to place it on a number line. And it's okay if you want to just do one number line, like I did here. Okay, so if you want to do just one number line on your piece of paper, and then 0.25. To figure out where that's going to go on a number line, well, we know that fraction is 25 hundredths because we already talked about that in another example. And to simplify this fraction, I know that 25 can go into 25 once and 25 can go into 100 4 times. Okay, so 25 100ths is the same as 1/4. So if I go from 0 to 1 and I divide this into 4 pieces, okay, so 0.25, we know that 1/4 is the same as 0.25, so it would go right there. on my number line. Okay, 0.25. So 0.25 is a rational number, and we just placed it on the number line. Let's go ahead and look at number 2. -4. Well, it's not one of our natural numbers. It's not one of our counting numbers. It's not considered a whole number, okay, because remember whole numbers are 0 and then all of the natural numbers. It is an integer. Okay, and it is also a rational number. If we want to write -4 as a fraction, all we have to do is write it over 1. Okay, so let's go ahead and put -4 on our number line. That one's really easy. -4 is right here on the number line. Okay, let's go ahead and look at the next one. -1.5. So let's go through our list. It's not natural. It's not whole. It's not an integer. Okay, because it's not a whole number, it's also not an integer. It is a rational number. And because it's rational, it's not irrational. Okay, so number 3, you should be writing this on your piece of paper, is a rational number. And to place that on a number line, -1.5 would be right here. Okay, it's in the middle of -1 and -2. It's -1 and then another half. That's what -1.5 is. Okay, the next one, square root of 2. It's not natural. It's not a whole number. It's not an integer. A square root of 2 is a non-repeating, never-ending decimal, so we can't write it as a fraction, which means it is an irrational number. Okay? The next one, and the square root of 2, the square root of 2 is going to fall somewhere in between 1 and 2. Okay, it's not quite 1.5. Remember, it was like 1.414. Okay, so the square root of 2 would be about right there on our number line. Okay, the next one, -3.5. This one is not natural, it's not whole, it's not an integer. It is a rational number. And because it is a rational number, it is not an irrational number. So -3.5 would be right here on your number line. Okay, let's look at the next one. 2/5. Okay, this isn't one of our counting numbers. Remember, our counting numbers, our natural numbers start with 1 and move up from there. It's not a whole number. So because it's not a whole number, it's not an integer. It is a rational number. And because it's a rational number, it's not an irrational number. 2/5. Okay, so we want to place 2/5 on our number line. I'm going to go ahead and clear all these other ones out here. Okay, so 2/5, that means we would want to divide from 0 to 1 up into 5 pieces. 1, 1, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and then 2/5 would be right here. Okay, that would be 2/5. The next one, 1 3/4. Again, a rational number. 1 3/4 would be 1, and then 3/4 of the way to 2. So if this is half, right here, 3/4 would be right here. So 1 3/4. And then our last one, -2/5. We know it's not natural, it's not whole. It is negative, but because it's not a whole number, it's not an integer. Okay, remember integers are the whole numbers and their opposites. Okay, so integer does not just mean positive and negative numbers. The negative numbers have to be a whole number. So negative 2/5. It is rational. It's not a never repeating, never ending decimal. So negative 2/5. To place that on our number line, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, negative 2/5 would be right here. Okay, so now it is your turn. So we just practiced a bunch of these together. If you are having any questions about this or you don't understand how to classify real numbers or place them on the number line, Miss Kohler and I are available right now to help you. Okay, so you can come into the breakout room where we're at and we will give you some more practice problems until you feel ready to take your quiz. If you understand this completely, you have a really good handle on it, um, you can go ahead and take your quiz. Remember to show all work. If they're okay, you guys, so these are just like the ones that I showed you for examples. When you are done with this quiz, you are going to turn it into the assignment box labeled real number classification. And Miss Kohler or I will grade your quiz and then let you know if you are ready to move on to the next lesson. Thanks, you guys. Remember that if you are having any questions at all, we are here to help you. So join us in the breakout room if you need to. If not, go ahead and take your quiz, get it uploaded to the assignment box, and we will see you tomorrow.